Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. Thanks for listening and truly making us the best in Baltimore. Today, I'm in conversation with an award-winning indie documentary filmmaker and a director for the Saul Zaentz Innovation Fund, as well as an instructor for Baltimore Youth Film Arts. Please welcome Annette Porter. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me here. I'm really excited. I love your program.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And thank you for being a part of this ongoing conversation. I like to look at this as just like this podcast as I got a bunch of people in a room and it's like, all right, you come up, let's have a conversation. And then, all right, we're done here. Next person. And that's the way it feels like sometimes, but in the best possible way. So for starters, I like to go very, very, very simple. I guess simple. Can you share the Annette Porter story and how you first got involved in filmmaking?
Oh, sure. It's really interesting. From here looking backwards, it actually seems like there's a path and a logic, but I can guarantee you it was not straightforward. It wasn't predictable. And there were a lot of times when I was on that path where I had no idea where I was going. And I share that oftentimes with young filmmakers, because it sounds like a plan, but I was always fascinated with photography. Mm-hmm. So visual communications was important to me. As a kid, I would stare endlessly at National Geographic, at old postcards that I would find, anything with pictures on it. And I kind of thought there was going to be this, I don't know, magical kind of process. If I stared long enough, their stories were going to enter me and I would know everything about them. And my father also traveled a ton when I was young internationally, and he would come back with always some different artifacts of the place he was in. And also, then he would bring lots of pictures. And at the time it was slides. So we would have these slideshows and I would watch incredible scenes. He was in India and there were women who were passing. And so, of course, I'm on a podcast and you can't see what I'm doing. I always talk with my hands. My apologies. But women who were passing cement in shallow trays on their heads in when they were building something. And it was like this amazing story of women over machines, because they could go around corners and up ladders and all over the place. And that stuck with me. Sure. But I started making photographs then in high school. Yeah. And I had a great teacher, and he got me to start understanding how to bring them about. And again, it was film. So there was a magic in watching them develop. And that was all really, really fun. But it always remained it was like my guilty pleasure. I never could imagine myself professionally being a photographer. I never knew any photographers. It was never offered up as an option. I never really saw anything like it. So I couldn't imagine it. So it was just this thing I did over here. And in the meantime, I went to business school, became a consultant, and then I would disappear periodically and go to workshops and make, just immerse myself. And then I think the first time I did anything professionally was I was diagnosed with cancer and lost all my hair with chemotherapy and started making pictures first of myself, just as a way to cope with going bald and losing my eyelashes and eyebrows. And then I started doing it for other people. It was all volunteer, but it was, I had a client, which were these women who also had lost their hair. So it's still in the realm of photography. And then once, in another sort of crisis after my husband died, I got involved in a campaign to try to help people who were campaigning against bullfights and bull fiestas in Spain.
Oh, wow.
It was an amazing campaign. And I joined, and then a friend of mine and I decided we would make a film. We had no idea how to make a film. We had no idea what we were doing, but we were filled with passion. We had a teeny bit of cash, and we just started doing it. And that was my forever I'm a filmmaker moment. I mean, it took me a long time before I could call myself a filmmaker, but from then on, that's what I did.
Yeah, I think having the passion to do something. And I think that's what I usually ride off of. Like, I'm riding this wave. I always joke about it of passion, obsession is the new one, and a little bit of spite. There's a little bit of spite in there. But I think those that get you through sometimes when you have very meager finances to fund something. And I think, people try to get into the spot. I don't want to get started because I don't have the funds and so on. It's like, make something. Just make something. And it's funny I'm saying that because what we were talking about beforehand, I have a buddy who wants to do an anime, and I'm like, just put together something. And just, even if it's a sketch, I was like, that's what they call adaptations. I was like, we've seen several, I think of the 12 O'Clock Boys here, and that turned into Charm City Kings. And, not to say that work wasn't done on that, but that was a documentary sort of film that turned into like a featured, like fictionalized version with a major like distributor. So, I mean, it could happen if you just have that passion, I think.
I think so. And I think, it goes a long way. And as you say, just make it, experiment, try. I think sometimes people get too focused on doing it right or making a perfect thing. It's like, try and fail. That's good. You learn. Yeah. Or, and I don't know. I mean, it's not a failure. Maybe it didn't work out like you expected, but it might have taken you somewhere else.
Has in that, and this is interesting to me, has there been an instance where you've had a project that you were working on, documentary or anything that you were working on within film that started off like, all right, this is the goal, this is the intent, and then somewhere you weren't really left, but it turned out really cool? It's like, kind of, I guess Bob Ross would say the happy accidents or what have you. Were there any examples of that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think almost all of them end up being happy accidents, right? I just got off a Zoom call now with a project that started with the idea was I'm producing it, and with the director it started off as an idea of a documentary. It morphed into a narrative, and actually where we're going to end up is with both, one of each. So nice. There are lots of happy accidents. I think the film I made about flying up Africa was about the first person who ever flew up Africa was a female, and I was fascinated by the story, and we wanted to do female stories, and then this crazy English woman wanted to do it herself in an open cockpit biplane. And the whole trip was a bunch of happy accidents. We had it all planned out what we were going to do. And, then we were supposed to go, for instance, we were flying in each country and we had to clear customs twice, and we had a chase plane with 250 pounds of equipment. We were in and out, and, in every single country. I mean, we were supposed to be in Zimbabwe, and all of a sudden the visas that we had were no good.
Oh, no.
They were good, but then they were declared no good.
Oh, no.
And, what do we do? And so as it turned out, the protagonist and I got in her biplane. We couldn't bring the rest of the crew. And we just flew it up by ourselves. And I had the camera in my hand, and we landed, and it turned into just a wonderful scene of the movie because it was crazy. And they're like, who are these crazy women? We're like, we're going anyway. You may not let us through. And it turned out to be one of our favorite scenes. And they met us with old cars, the classic cars that had been sitting in Zimbabwe forever. And the whole scene is a hoot. And it would never have happened. It was not what was planned. What was planned was boring in the end.
So that brings me to this question. I feel like it was almost a natural segue there a little bit. Tell me about the reality of directing films as an independent filmmaker compared to some of those expectations, because that right there, it just seems like problem solving on 11. It's like, we're going to make this happen. We're going to figure it out.
Well, that's it. So it's funny, like, what's the reality versus the fantasy or imagined version? It's both like super much messier, right? Nothing goes according to plan. And it's also so much more detail oriented. So you really have to get down. And I tend to be more macro. I like to work in teams where I've got somebody who's much more micro also. So it's a nice balance. Yeah. But directing is both. In some ways, you get mired into the just tiniest of all minutia, and you have to be, and you have to live with that. And your friends get really sick of you because what started off as a really interesting story has now become super boring, right? It takes 7 years, might take 5 years to make a documentary, and you're still talking about the same thing. So all those fun stories have become now, really, one more time, we're gonna miss you. So, but on the other hand, what's always exciting to me is you plan for the best, but you're prepared for the worst.
Yeah.
As it often comes through. And I don't know. I love it. It's all about people. I love documentaries, which means things can go not according to plan a lot.
So I would imagine, like, having that background in strategy and communications, also a business major. So, representing, having that background in strategy and communication, like comes in handy, like being able to rely on some of those skills, some of those tactics that are there. Is that true? And what ways does that background like kind of help you in your approach to filmmaking, or even in your approach to collaboration in filmmaking?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely true. It is what was fun about documentary was all of a sudden my secret passion and my love of visual arts married up with everything I had learned in consulting.
Yeah.
So we used to say a lot of consulting was management by storying around, telling story. You might figure out things, but you had to be able to figure out the story to tell the client. So that was important. And it's like figuring out a puzzle. That's like any story. What's the story? What are the main beats? What are the things that are important? What's the subtext? What's the big story? So those are really similar. There are a lot of similar skills. Interviewing. As a consultant, I was always interviewing people. I was setting up interviews. I was trying to understand their business. I was trying to understand why, what was special about one competitor over another. So that was a skill. And then to be really practical, so a lot of the skills are the same, but the pay scale is super different. Mm-hmm. So I was able to make money as a business consultant that I'm now spending as a filmmaker. It's not, you don't make as much money as a filmmaker. And so being a business person first helped me then become an artist. I wish it wasn't so, but that was what it was for me.
I'm kind of seeing that now myself in this vantage point of people are reaching out and, consult here, consult there, help people kind of realize their passion and because it was something that D. Watkins mentioned about this idea of people being perceived as overnight successes. And he's like, that doesn't exist. And I was thought about it. I was like, yeah, I'm finally getting a little, a little rub here and there. And I was like, I've been doing this for a long time. And I was like, this is actually the most stable career I've been in. And, 13 years, almost 14 is not a short period of time. But at the same time, it's definitely not overnight.
No, I don't know anyone actually who's an overnight success. I know people who are overnight recognized, yes, but they're not an overnight success. And they've been at it for a long time. And I sort of look at all of it as, if anything, my metaphor is like recycling. I might earn something here, and that allows me to do something over there that allows me to support this over here. And that's just the way I look at it. Suffice to say, I'll never be a billionaire. That's just fine. But I'm going to be making stuff.
Yeah, I remember when I was like much younger, and I took a few film classes, and I was really into like Kevin Smith stuff or what have you. And I remember listening to one of his talks, and I think that's that proto sort of, oh, you're doing these like talks, you're doing these like Q&A sessions. I was like, I kind of like this side of it, and then it being filmed or what have you. And I just remember him sharing like this idea, and I've heard it from multiple people about, oh, I filmed my first movie through like credit card debt, to like panic-inducing credit card debt.
Yeah, exactly. That's another way to do it. That fills me with anxiety.
Same. I'm like,
fills me with anxiety when I hear young filmmakers doing it. It's like, ooh, so much can go wrong, and it can take so long, even if it pans out in the end. You've got to be able to keep the lights on.
And I think that's where, one of the things you were touching on that's really, really cool. And I think I'm witnessing it as well. Having that business, that strategy, that, all right, what is this line item right here? How can I have some strategy around this versus just going? And I think being able to this was maybe a marketing sort of thing that I was doing, maybe marketing sales, but the good, better, best of it. And that's the way I try to budget out things. If someone is like, hey, I want to consult, I want you to consult for me and so on, and they're saying, this is my budget, I'm like, all right, I can do this at this rate, or I could do this. It might be less episodes. It might be, and how do we fit within it that it's serving the person or what have you? But strategy goes into that, I think, and communication goes into that. Things that I think when people are just doing their thing, that's sometimes lost. And I go back to maybe the first episode and just sometimes like people who are doing their art and doing their work, they need to have that business class just to kind of give them that quick refresher. Like, here's that nudge. Here's some how to stay afloat.
Exactly. It doesn't do you any good to make only one piece and then go out of business. You've got to be able to sustain yourself in between what you're creating.
Yeah, and I prefer sustain. I don't like scale. I don't know why. It's just, something feels weird about scale to me.
Well, see, me too, because I don't have a vision of making lots and lots and lots of movies. So that to me means scale. Yeah. But what I do have a vision of is making rewarding films, fulfilling films I want to make. And I don't know that there's a number. So it doesn't feel like scale to me either. I understand what you're saying.
So then, and that's a nice way to kind of circle back into some of the filmmaking questions. I want to ask you about directing. So how would you describe your directing style? And do you have any like filmmaking like signatures? Like, is there a certain type of shot, certain subject matter that really resonates with you that you're like, I'm attracted to these sort of projects?
It's a super interesting question. So I've been, and it's interesting because I'm doing a lot of producing now. So if I think back on the directing, I do too. I think probably the biggest signature has been finding ways of really incorporating the person's real input into the film. Yeah. So when I first started, there was always a joke around. It's like, oh God, it's Annette's project. There's going to be, and before GoPro, it was a flip cam. There's going to be a flip cam on it. And I was tying them onto dancers so we could see different angles. I was hanging them from ceilings so I could see them kick up to the top. And then GoPro was like, I was in heaven. And so then it was a big joke. I was like, how many GoPros is she going to So, I was thinking about this. It's always been there. Like, how do I get your point of view? How do I really get into and take it out of me observing you? Mm-hmm. And so I started doing more and more video diaries. And the first ones I did actually was with Baltimore Youth Film Arts, teaching them. And then we came up with a way that people would record video diaries. I'd have them put them into the cloud and I would watch them. Or they had a private file if they didn't want anyone to see them, but another one where they could have the privacy of telling their intimate stories, but yet then have me be able to come in and be a witness. Yeah. So it worked out. And then by the time we did a formal interview together, I knew them in a very different way. I hadn't edited their stories. I had simply listened to them. And so that probably, of anything, that's, I think, the thread that comes through. I just made a series of short films for an NGO called, it's a female campaign for education in Africa. It used to be called CamFed, but now it's just called the Campaign for Female Education. And we made a series of 5 films in Ghana. Yeah. And these were all, I used video diaries and a team of filmmakers the same kind of way. And they turned out to be some of my favorites. So that's really, I think, my signature is trying to get in, whether it started with GoPros and now video diaries are a big part of it.
That's great. I may have had a flip cam here. I may have a GoPro here. Because, it's one of those things that doing that. There's a video, a couple videos that we did and put on YouTube for a different podcast I was doing. And the studio apartment I lived in had this kind of cage set up that I had all of my like Funko Pops and stuff on. And the camera was like positioned right there that you could just see us. It was not a good shot at all. I kind of feel like really bad about it, actually. It's like, I've taken a film class. It's like, better than this. But I was like, this is the only way I could use the remote to turn it on and to try to sync it, because I remember hating editing so much. And because I was good at it, I'm very good at cutting, especially with doing this as well. And I remember in the film class, I just remember people would come to me, hey, can you edit my film for me, my student film? I was like, no, absolutely not. And then they would twist my arm, and it's one of those things where it's like, I just hated that whole like looping through that same song. It's like, look, if it comes on tonight, I'm going to be really upset. I want to talk about Nylon Films. Let's talk about that a little bit. So could you share that with us? Because when I was typing it in, doing the Google search, the Annette Porter Google search or what have you, that popped up a lot. I did Google you. I felt like I was doing passive stalking. So tell me about Nylon Films.
Well, I hope you only found good things about me. Nylon Films, that was really, it ties back to what we were saying. It's a way to be practical about our filmmaking. I started it with a really good friend of mine in London, Helen and I, and she had been producing films for broadcast and also for corporate work. And we decided we wanted to tell films from a female perspective. Yeah. And Nylon came out of New York and London. And then nice. we also liked the name Nylon. We liked the whole play on it. So we kept with Nylon Films. And our first business, the core of our business was stuff like we were doing infomercials, and we did films for people like the Wax Museum.
Yeah.
And we did like lots of content for their displays. So we had the Nobel Prize winners. There was a whole series on them. And, stuff that was practical, but quite frankly, paid the bills and meant we bought really good equipment and we had it there for documentaries because we were thinking about it. We thought, well, if we're doing documentaries, you really can be absorbed with one for years. Mm-hmm. And it's a funny business, documentary filmmaking. It's not like other businesses I know where with documentary filmmakers, the way it's set up, you bear all the risk. But there isn't actually a big payout in the end. It's flipped. Normally the people bearing the risk get the biggest payout, but you're at the bottom of the food chain when it comes to selling. So we thought, okay, how are we want to tell these stories? We know we want to. What are we going to do? So we started a corporate business as well. And then we also worked for NGOs. So I was a complete sliding scale. We have different rates for different things that make sense. I was really interested in dance and the arts world. So I do a lot of work for arts companies. And I did a lot of work for the Romberg Dance Company in London when I lived there. And we did all their short promotional work, and I did all their archive work. So for me, it was a nice mix because it's not just financial, but it also was, there were short things I worked on, long things. Sometimes you'd find an idea for a long piece out of one of your corporate work and vice versa. So it worked for us. Yeah. And that's the model we stuck with.
I dig it. And yeah, I mean, being able to take something from maybe something that feels like I'm doing a few corporate things or a few contractual things, and I'm learning different things out of that I can apply to the work that I'm doing or what have you. And it's like I'm being paid to learn in some regards, what have you. So I'm getting something out of it, or even those funds to kind of keep, my editor happy or keep my assistant happy or what have you. So, hey, I can pay you on time or what have you. And I think it ultimately is driving what one is doing. And I think that's an observation I took from that.
And we had we could afford great equipment. We could have the Reds and that then Saturday and Sunday, friends and family could use. Yeah. Ourselves. So it worked. It was like, hey, the documentary world isn't going to allow us to hire that kind of equipment, but the corporate world, requires us to have it. So it worked out.
It's like that thing where you hear actors or filmmakers will say like, one for me and two for them and one for me or what have you. It's like, oh, okay. And I find myself doing a little bit of that where, I enjoy doing this podcast. This is a lot of fun, but I also do a movie review podcast. So whenever I'm like getting some type of paid thing through this podcast, I'm like, I'm going to be funding this movie review podcast. I want to talk about Predator for 2 hours, and that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. I mean, we are. I feel really blessed that I get to kind of scratch all these itches, if you will. I mean, I have broad interests over deep interests. I think
Mm-hmm. And I think so. Business degree, administration, marketing. What was your business degree?
I got an MBA in business, international business and strategy.
Yeah, I remember some of the stuff you said. I just had the undergrad, but business administration, concentration in marketing, but business administration. And I really kind of had that approach that you described. I was like, I'd rather have a broad versus this very specific, because it just, I don't know. It's almost like I like baseball, right? It's almost like you're a closer. You can only do this one thing. You have this one skill set. And I'd rather have a little bit of all of these different things. I think that that's more valuable. And I can bring in people who are specialists in those particular areas. And I think that helps me succeed, or helps me at least have a direction and strategy.
That's what worked for me. Strategy was interesting to me. And I mean, I know a lot of really weird things about, I know about the kind of V-belts they use in the mining industry. I've been out to, I've been out on oil rigs looking at workflow. So I know really random things about a lot. And that was much more interesting to me than knowing sort of everything about Doritos, say, having that singular approach.
I mean, I know a lot about Doritos, though. So
I know only one aspect. They're good.
Yeah, right. See, there you go. That's the most important one. So let's talk about the Saul Zaentz Innovation Fund and your role within it, and ultimately, what is it about the fund that resonated with you?
Now we're getting something really close to my heart. The Innovation Fund. I'm the director of the Saul Zaentz Innovation Fund. And it is an incubator fund that was started up to really help promote filmmaking in Baltimore, and Baltimore-ish, or the greater Baltimore region, and to give voice to underserved voices, people's. And I always say it's like people whose stories have been overlooked, ignored, stolen, and really to give that voice. So we're focused on, for starters, we're focused on an area that's not LA or New York, which are the hubs of the kind of filmmaking. So we have different geographical experiences right here. And as we were talking about, there's a culture of Baltimore that's different from a culture of elsewhere. So in that way, we're focused on kind of the underserved, but we are very much focused on finding voices, women, people of color, people who have been underrepresented, Latina voices in the film industry. So we take great pride. I always say we don't look anything like Hollywood in terms of the numbers, and we like that. Yeah. We like that very much. So we're sort of near 70% overall people of color in our as fellows, and somewhere between 60 and 70% females. So almost the mirror opposite of Hollywood in terms of the numbers. So that's who we are. And we support people through, we bring people in every year, a new crop of fellows. And they go through an intense story lab where I'm able to bring in 20, 25 independent film producers from all over. Now we have them coming in internationally. The filmmakers love coming here because they're working with people. And I've heard them describe as like, these are raw stories. These are personal stories. These are people really committed. So we have this great group of filmmakers who come down. We spend an intense weekend on their stories. We have screenplay labs for them. We've got producers labs. So every fellow gets that. They get one-on-one mentoring from these amazing experts. And then about 75% of them we also fund. We put about $500,000 a year into emerging artists' work.
Wow.
It's exciting. And it's I always call it gold dust because it's you can be a very green project and get funded from us. We're not out there looking for the diamond in the rough for that one home run. Although in fact, a number of our fellows are hitting it out of the park. They are doing that, but we're looking at raising up the entire industry.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's exciting. I love it. I have never done anything that I enjoy more.
That's great. So again, maybe one and a half real questions left before we get to those rapid fire ones. So for this kind of
you're making me nervous about
no. So this next crop of filmmakers, these fellows and such, what sorts of stories is it? I get personal and I get some of these just a lot of times they're underrepresented. So it's going to be things that are maybe in that lived experience or alternative perspectives that we often don't see, or often is oh, this is, an indie darling or what have you. But what sorts of stories are you kind of seeing, or, in the last, let's say, year or so, what kind of stories are you seeing?
It's interesting. I'm seeing a gathering momentum for hybrid docs. where, where people are using both documentary and narrative storytelling together. So seeing that growing, and I find that a really fascinating field to be working in. I'm really excited because I see so many stories where the stories themselves look more like my lived world than the stories that necessarily come out of the big studios. So the protagonists are of all different flavors. The supporting stuff, it looks more normal to me, and I'm thrilled by that, and that kind of diversity across everything I think makes better storytelling, makes better filmmaking, and it's less rarefied. It's less this, you have to look this way to be an actor. Why?
I mean, that's one of the reasons I may not have gone into acting or anything along those lines. One, I don't read lines, but it's like, where's the 6'4" chubby black guy protagonist with the hairline? Where's that guy? I'm looking for a very specific guy. Where's my guy? Where's my guy? Damn it!
Exactly. And what I know about it at Zaentz, and what I'm really thrilled about, is we look behind the camera also like we do in front of the camera, and that's still missing in Hollywood. So we're diverse on both in front of and behind the camera. And I want to see that. I want to keep seeing that. And I want to see people, not only at Zaentz, I want to see people challenging that, saying, I'm not going to, I might be able to command the salary, but I'm not going to work on this set unless my female counterpart makes the same. I'm not going to work on this project unless unless when I look out at my cameramen and camera women and sound people, it's diverse.
Yeah, and this is more of an observation. That was actually the last real question as I think about it. But I did have this observation where you want more, kind of like more diversity in terms of the stories that are going out there, and that's representative of the people that are working on these projects, and just macroly speaking. And one of the things that I've wanted for a long time, that I'm like, no one's done that yet. No one has any interest in it. Like where's my Easy Rollins story? Where's my that's the stuff I want. We got a reboot of Perry Mason. That's great. I enjoy it. But it's like, where is my Easy Rollins story? Where are these kind of these stories that don't fit? It seems like it has to be something that falls into a certain type of story. And that's kind of speaks to me that there's not enough of the people behind the movies that look like me who are trying to do that. And that's the thing that's odd. It's still like it's movement in a direction, but I feel like more of it. So having the fund and helping filmmakers kind of get that leg up and to move into being able to tell potentially different types of stories that often aren't told with different types of people who are working on it. I think that leads to, hey, I worked on this project. Now I'm going to work on my own later, or what have you. That leads to growth and people feeling like, oh, I can do this. And, that's the type of stuff that really interests me. I remember a few years back, this is so ridiculous. I did 4 hours of free radio at a high school or what have you. I didn't know it was free, so it's a whole different thing. But I did 4 hours of radio, and it was just to show these kids that look like me, Black kids in Baltimore, oh yeah, you can do this. I'm regular. I'm a regular guy, what have you. You can do this, and really being able to show it and say, hey, come on over here. Let me show you how this works. Whereas usually it would be, oh, don't touch that. That's expensive. Or why are you touching that? That's not for you. And I think being able to do that in a film setting and seeing that it's not rarefied and seeing that, pretty much have a story and we'll help you punch it up. We'll help you get it to where it needs to be at and really take you through, the rounds. You learn something, you're able to grow, that you can make these next great films, these next great documentaries. Yeah.
Yeah. And, going way back to what we were saying about failing, one of the reasons I like being early and being able to give seed money to things is that if you wait, you're waiting until somebody makes it. By then, they're going to be afraid of failing. Yeah. There's the stakes are too high. If you're the one Black woman making a film, you know, you got the weight of the world on you.
All of the pressure is on you.
We want to be early. We want you to be out there, you know, trying.
So I think that's a good space for us to kind of stop and hit these rapid fire questions.
Okay.
It's all good. They're fun. They're good questions, mostly. Okay, some of them. I don't know. 40%. It's fine. It's fine. We're not going to recover. We're not going to recover. So I'm going to start off with a relatively easy one. Popcorn with butter or not?
No butter.
Okay.
But salt. Okay.
All right. I like buttery popcorn. I'm one of those. It's like, give me the fat. Don't give me the high blood pressure. Just give me the fat. Just give me all of the.
You're right here.
So I read that you're comfortable in a corporate boardroom as well as high altitude, like in Chile, in the trail in Chile. So what is the oddest place that you've shot?
Oh, the oddest place has to be in an abandoned airport in Greece that we had to land in because we were running out of gas. Mm-hmm. And I filmed a scene where we were in this little biplane. We landed and we filmed the scene going there with somebody from an airplane club who took us to a gas station, and we filled it up, and we hoped that gas would work in the plane. That was my oddest little.
That's very specific. Well, because I asked you this before we got started, I'm going to ask you now. What would be a good spy name for you?
A spy name. Depending on who you are, it might be Persistence.
Double O Persistence.
Yeah, Double O Persistence.
Persistence Porter.
So others might call it Double O Irritating.
Yeah. Let's see. What's your favorite place in Baltimore? And it may change. It's just like a place that let me take out favorite. When you think of Baltimore, what is a place that comes to mind?
You know what I've been loving lately in Baltimore is walking along that boardwalk, just down from Fells Point all the way around. It's just really, really nice. I mean, I kind of disappear into another zone, and I maybe it's because I've just recently kind of been introduced to it, but I love that. I love looking out of the water.
Yeah, that's nice.
And you can walk for a long time.
Yeah, you can actually. Yeah. So this is the last one, and this is more of a true or false. And if you want to add some extra, seasoning to that, feel free. But I read this quote earlier that really is sticking out to me right now is facts tell, but stories sell. Is that true?
Facts tell, but stories sell. Yes, I would say true. Very true. That's what that whole thing I was telling you, saying we used to call consulting management by storying around. Yeah. It didn't matter what your analysis was. If you didn't tell a good story to be able to sell it, you might as well not have done the research. Yeah. I'm all about the story.
There you have it. That's pretty much it for the day's podcast. So I want to thank you for coming onto this podcast, and
thank you.
You're welcome. And two, I want to invite and encourage you to share anything in these final moments that you feel like we didn't really key in on, and tell fine folks where to check out the fund, your work, all of that good stuff. The floor is yours.
Oh, great. Well, I'm going to encourage people to really check us out at the Saul Zaentz Innovation Fund, which is zentzfund.com. And apply. You've got a story to tell. Let us help you tell it. Is sort of our moniker. We really believe that, and I think, I'm such a fan of Baltimore. We've got such a great creative community here.
Yeah,
and I think the more we all recognize that, the better it is. I don't think we have to feel like we're the poor cousins or less thans or anything. I'm like, wow, this is Baltimore.
Yeah.
And we love it.
So listeners can pop over to zentzfund.com to get more information, right?
That's great. zentzfund.com. And if you want to find me in the doc world, it's at Nylon Films. .co.uk, since we started in London.
Nice. Well, there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Annette Porter for coming on to the podcast. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there are the next generation of filmmakers in and around Baltimore. You just got to look for them.